The House on Lane 66, Chapter 4. Tree's Company. The snow crunched beneath your boots as you circled the outer perimeter of the immediate lawn. Great puffs of mist drifted away on the gentle wind as you breathed the chilly air and looked up at the bare trees. With your homework for the week completed, you could type up your essays before class tomorrow. You figured it was time that you tried to find something to do as the house's groundskeeper. Except with all the snow on the ground, you didn't know what else to do unless more snow fell from the steel gray sky and gave you something new to shovel. You looked out into the dense trees, knowing that there was another 50 acres of property to inspect, but something about those woods made your skin crawl. Maybe it was because you knew that other monsters roamed the mountains, ones that might not be as nice as the brothers if you came across them. Not all monsters like humans, as you were well aware. Venturing off on your own wasn't the best idea. You weren't a park ranger. You couldn't find or read trails or know how to find your way by the shapes of the stars. If you lost sight of the house, you would be lost. Something kicked up snow at the base of one of the many tree trunks in the distance. You squinted, trying to make out whatever was doing that. It had to be small, you reasoned. You couldn't see it too well from the edge of the lawn. You looked over your shoulder back at the house, wondering if you should investigate. Whatever it was didn't seem dangerous, and you wouldn't lose sight of the house if you walked just a little bit into the woods. With your hands in the pockets of your leather jacket, you trudged forward through the snow. One of your hands gripped your bottle of pepper spray tightly, your eyes focused on the thing kicking up the snow. Oh no, what happened to you? You knelt in the snow just shy of the tree's trunk and drew your hands out of your pockets. A dove was lying in the snow. Its chest heaved with each hard, panicked breath it took. Its feathers were sticking up all over the place, and one of its wings was bent at an odd angle. As you reached for it, it tried to fly away. All its frantic flapping could do was kick up snow in your face and sent the dove tumbling over itself. "It's okay," you crooned, gently picking up the frightened animal. The dove's heart was beating so wildly it practically vibrated. "Don't worry, I'm not going to eat you. I want to help." As you brought the dove to the warm folds of your jacket to keep it safe, it stilled, as if it knew at that point that you weren't going to cause it harm. Or maybe it was simply grateful to get out of the cold snow. You wondered if monster food would work just like it did for you and could heal its broken wing. You decided to take it back to the house to try out your theory. If it didn't work, you could hail a taxi from your phone and take the poor bird to a vet in town. A branch snapped out of the field of your vision and your head whipped around. Goosebumps that had nothing to do with the cold raised themselves on your arms. Your mind immediately brought up the image of some forest predator that had come for the dove. Were there wolves on Mount Ebott? Or bears? As if the forest sensed your unease, a sharp gust of wind suddenly blew out of its depths to raise the hairs on the back of your neck. Something was out there watching you. You were sure of it. Something was whispering your name. Something poked your arm and you screamed. You fell back into the snow and looked for whatever had touched you. One of your hands wrapped protectively around the dove cradled inside your jacket. The other had whipped into your pocket to pull out your pepper spray. Axe tilted his skull at you. A slow chuckle escaped him as a single red eye light looked down upon you. "Axe, that's not funny!" Your cheeks reddened with indignant embarrassment. You tossed a handful of loose snow at him and pocketed your weapon. "Don't scare me like that! I could have pepper sprayed you!" He chuckled again and pulled one of his hands out of his pockets of his frayed blue hoodie and offered it to you. You carefully cradled the dove in one arm, took his hand, and let him help you to your feet. Your angry, one-sided swats dusted snow off the bell of your red sweater dress and black stockings. "You're easy to sneak up on." Axe continued to chuckle. "At least one of you found your fright hilarious." "Why would you want to sneak up on me?" you asked moodily. "It's not a very funny prank." Axe shook his head and looked out into the woods at the trail his copper slippers had left in the snow. "Not a prank. Practice." "Practice?" You followed his gaze into the woods, curious. "For what?" He shrugged and turned his single red eye light back to you. "For not being seen." That wasn't creepy at all. "Why do you not want to be seen?" "So they don't run away." You weren't sure if you wanted to ask who they were. Axe's eyelight found the lump in your jacket, and you were saved from addressing his creepy pastime as he pointed it out. What's that? A dove? You opened your leather jacket just enough for him to peer inside and see it. I just found it before you, found me. I think its wing is broken. Axe looked at you and tilted his head. Are you going to eat it? What? No! You covered the dove and started walking back towards the house. Axe trotted along after you. I want to help it. Once it's all healed, I'm going to release it back to the woods. Why? What do you mean, why? You asked as you opened the front door and passed through the entryway. There was no point in taking off your boots. Whether your theory worked or it didn't, you would be back outside in a moment. Why help it? It's broken. It's kinder to kill it. No, you stubbornly declared. There was no need for that kind of mercy when there were other, much better options. You searched the cupboards with one hand until you found the bread tucked away on the brothers' shelves. Axe watched you carefully as you tore off a small piece of the crust and drew the dove out of your jacket to offer the food. Just because it's a little messed up doesn't mean it's done for, you said to him. I agree that it would be cruel to leave it and let it flounder around in the snow before it dies or gets eaten, but I know there's a better way than that. The dove turned its head away from your fingers and tried to return to the warmth and safety of your jacket. You had to close your fingers gently around its body to prevent it from falling off your hand onto the hard tile below. Come on, you crooned gently and dropped the bread into your open palm to offer it again. It's okay, little guy. This might make you feel better. Try it. The bird twisted its head from side to side, its black eyes investigating the bread crust. Axe continued to watch you, a curious gleam in his eyelight. Finally, the dove seemed to like the look of the food, and it pecked at your palm. The hard pokes from its little beak made you flinch, but you tried your best to remain steady. The bread seemed to do the trick. Moments after the crust disappeared down its little throat, the awkward angle of the bird's wing righted itself. Its feathers smoothed down, and the distressed flapping of its wings settled into a smooth tuck against its body. The dove seemed to notice the healing and immediately took off out of your hand in a frantic flapping of mended wings. Ah, no, catch it! You shouted to Axe and tried to grab the dove as it flew around the kitchen looking for an exit. With a quick afterthought, you quickly added, but don't hurt it! The dove flew towards the window over the sink. It was moments away from slamming headfirst into the glass when the sharp scent of iron filled the air. Red plasma surrounded the dove's body, halting it mid-flight. It slowly drifted backwards, its wings still beating as it tried to fly out of the binding magical cloud and back into your outstretched hands. You caught the dove and calmed its beating wings, gently folded them against its tiny body so you could safely hold it without risking more injury. It cooed gently in your hands. You smiled at Axe, who was shoving his hand back into the pocket of his blue hoodie. Red plasma still dripped from his fingers. Thank you, Axe. I don't think I could have gotten it on my own. He shrugged at you, his skull still tilted to the side. His soft red eyelight watched you put the dove back into your jacket. Want to come with me to set it free? You offered your free hand to Axe, who stared at it a long moment. His plasma-free hand came out of the hoodie, and he wrapped his bony fingers around yours. His smile widened as he considered you again. Yes. Axe got the door for you as you walked back outside together. Once you were both on the edge of the lawn, you took your hand back from Axe to bring the dove out of your jacket. It cooed inside the warm, gentle bars of your fingers as it felt the winter cold on its face. You paused, thinking, and offered the dove to Axe. He'd been the one to catch it in the kitchen. Did he want to let it go? He shook his skull at you in a polite refusal to grab hold of the bird. You shrugged and gently tossed the dove towards the steely sky, smiling as you watched it spread its wings to catch the air and soar away through the bare branches. A warm feeling filled your chest as you silently wished it a long life. You really like birds, huh? You turned your gaze from the top of the trees towards Axe. His red eyelight moved ever so slightly as he examined you yet again. Yeah, I do. Though you turned back towards the woods, your thoughts followed the dove. Many years ago, you'd been confined to one room, one bed, for a very long time. The television had lost your interest after a few short weeks. It only made you yearn for real people. Instead, you had stared out of the one window you had for hours to watch the ground far below. Through the slits in your gauze mask, you observed the faraway people walk the sidewalks and the birds that flew in the tops of the trees or past your high window. Sometimes doves, like the one you just held in your hands, landed on the thin concrete window sill outside. They waited patiently, watching you through the glass for crumbs you passed through the barrier of the sterile room to give them. How often you had wished you could fly away when you were lying in that hospital bed. How often did you envy their wings and their freedom, their whole unmarred bodies. You started at a gentle touch on your sleeve. Ax had reached out to you. The bone of his brow was crinkled with concern. I'm okay. You smiled sadly. The memory of the hospital was pushed away and cast out of your mind as you sought a different subject. Hey, Ax, forgive me for being curious, but I was wondering, what do you do out in the woods? You've been gone since yesterday, and Butch says it's not unusual for you to disappear there for stretches of time. Ax contemplated you for a long moment, then his red eyelight looked out into the trees. I find a lot of things, he said, each one of his words slow and carefully spoken through his deep baritone. Then he held his hand out to you like he wanted you to shake it. His flat teeth turned into a grin and his eyelight sparkled. Want to see one of them? What are you going to show me? You asked, nervous. You were already wondering if he was going to use that strange magic to move you from place to place, just like he had when he first took you to the shed. It was rather uncomfortable and scary to find yourself in a completely different place in a blink of an eye, especially when you weren't entirely sure how you got there, save for the vague explanation of magic. Something good. I think you'll really like it. Your gaze darted to his offered hand, then to his bright eyelight. Promise? That vacant grin of his widened. Promise. You slowly reached out and grasped his bony fingers. Axe pulled you closer, and your back hit his chest with a dull thump. You blinked, and darkness pressed you from all directions. Your nostrils were filled with the scent of iron, and you felt like you were going to choke from that split second without air. And then you were surrounded by barren tree branches with limbs heavy with ice. You looked down to orient yourself, already suspecting where you were, and screamed. The ground had to be 100, 1,000 feet below you, according to your startled mind. You frantically tried to steady yourself, and your boots slipped off the icy limb that you'd appeared upon. Axe quickly snatched you out of the air. He pulled back until he held you tightly to his chest once more. One arm around your waist kept you secure. The other hand covered your mouth to stifle your scream of fear. Why the hell had he taken you so high up without any kind of warning? You won't fall, he whispered in your ear, soothing you with the deep, steady pace of his words. Try to be quiet. You'll scare them. You squirmed inside his hold and wrapped your arms around him, squeezing his rib cage as hard as you could. You buried your face in his blue hoodie. Your heart pounded in your ears, and you shut your eyes tight against the urge to look down again. Shh. Axe gave your hip a gentle squeeze. A bony finger passed over your forehead as he pushed your hair out of your eyes. I've got you. You won't fall. Axe, I don't like being this high. You looked up and hissed at him, though your voice was far too squeaky to be threatening as you had hoped. I want to be on the ground. Not yet. Axe held a bony finger to your cold lips to silence you. I promise that you'll enjoy this. Let me show you. Despite your misgivings, you gritted your teeth and nodded. It wasn't like you could get down on your own. You had no experience climbing trees. When it was clear to him that you wouldn't protest any more, Axe guided your arms up and around his neck to show where to secure yourself. He lifted your legs to seat you on his pelvis and brought your chest flush against his so that he could hold you with one arm. His skull turned upwards towards the higher branches looming above your heads. His red eyelight shrank and sharpened as his searching gaze darted back and forth. With a sudden burst he leapt from the branch. You squealed in fright and buried your face into his blue hoodie. Even through your panic you managed to peek one eye out from the threadbare fabric and marveled at the graceful dexterity with which Axe climbed. What he was doing couldn't be easy in any sense of the word. Why was he carrying you and using only one hand to climb? Why did he have to climb in the first place? Hadn't he used his magic to make both of you appear where he wanted to go? We're here, Axe whispered in your ear, his voice barely louder than his warm breath, and sat the both of you on a new branch. With a bit of shifting and a pair of hands tight on your hips, he placed you inches in front of him with your back against his chest, your eyes slammed shut again so that you wouldn't look down. His bony hand slid down to squeeze your thighs through the black stockings and offer quiet reassurance that you were stable. He pointed your frightened gaze towards the trunk of the tree. Look there. They're just inside. Hesitant, you slowly cracked an eye open and followed the direction of his bony finger to a hole in the tree. Something moved inside, something white and fluffy. Your eyes widened in astonishment. A beautifully magnificent snowy owl was sleeping in the hollow of the tree. Its white head was buried into the puffed feathers of its speckled breast, and its large eyes were closed against the dreary sunlight as it slept. You leaned closer to the hollow and saw little white fluffs just underneath its wings. A chick poked its head out from beneath its mother's poofed up feathers. It looked at you, blinked sleep from its huge black eyes. You had to bite your tongue to prevent yourself from squealing in delight. They were too fucking adorable, and oh, how you wished you could touch one. You turned back to Axe, rosy cheeks and beaming. You opened your mouth to say something. A quick press of a bony finger to your lips and a shaking of his skull bid you to silence. His eyelight glanced at the family of owls to indicate that you needed to be quiet for their sake. You nodded and returned your attention back to the tree hollow. So Axe liked to look for animals. That explained what he meant when he snuck up on you. He was honing his stealth so that he wouldn't spook the woodland creatures. Watching things quietly, following silently, all that behavior made sense. You chastised yourself for finding it creepy before, now that you knew what Axe's hobby was. Knowing what you did know, your opinion of him turned completely on the opposite direction. A quiet animal lover. That was so damn sweet and it made your heart ache. What other amazing things has he found in these woods? The frosty air bit at your fingers and, far too soon for your liking, started to numb them with cold. You turned back to Axe and pointed at the ground with a tilt of your head. He nodded. Once more he helped you turn around on the branch to face him. Once your arms were wrapped securely around his neck, he picked you up and slipped silently off the branch. The descent down the tree was much slower than the initial climb, as Axe took extra caution not to slip off the icy coating over the top of the branches. When he deemed the two of you were far enough from the hollow, darkness and iron pressed in on you, and you were back at the house before you finished blinking. Axe, that was amazing, you said breathless, as he set you back on your feet. How did you even find those owls in the first place, amid all that snow, no less? I'm seriously impressed. A red glowing flush rose over Axe's cheekbones. He idly scratched the edges of the shattered hole in his skull and avoided your bright, wide-eyed gaze. It wasn't easy, he admitted on a deep rumble of baritone. Their wings make them silent when they fly, and they only come out at night. They'll fly away if they smell magic. Animals in general run from the scent. Well, you've got some seriously impressive talents. You grinned as you offered him the well-deserved compliment, and his blush deepened over his shy smile. Something Butch told you surfaced in your mind, particularly the tip that Axe always returned from the woods when he was hungry. So you asked him, now that you're back, would you like me to make you something to eat? I'd really like to make you lunch, as a thanks for showing me the owls. Axe's red eye light brightened. He nodded eagerly at your offer. As you walked back towards the house, you asked Axe about the creatures he'd found in the woods. Deer were plentiful, a fox had a den beneath the shed, and he confirmed your suspicions that both wolves, bears, and sometimes other monsters roamed the woods beyond. So don't go out by yourself. Though Axe sat at the kitchen table, he caught and held your gaze. A hard note of warning was in his deep, deliberate tone. It's dangerous out there for a human. I can't avoid them. I'm the groundskeeper, you said as you pulled the meat, vegetables, and cheese from the brothers' shelves on the fridge. Axe held up a hand and politely turned down the meat, which you felt was odd given his love for food, but you respected his choice and returned the deli slices to your drawer. I'll have to go out past the yard at some point. How else can I do my job? I'll go with you. Axe's eyelight carefully followed the movements of your hands as they grated cheese over a bowl. These are my woods. I protect them and guard my territory. Then I guess you'll have to take me on a nature walk when the snow melts and show me around your woods. You smirked and poured a box of macaroni into a pan of boiling water. Axe's smile beamed with pride. You finished Axe's lettuce, tomato, and cheese sandwich. Just as you set the plate in front of him and were about to turn around to start the sauce for mac and cheese, Mutt wandered up from the basement. He looked a right mess with his wrinkled orange t-shirt and sagging black sweatpants. What's cooking, Pap? Mutt's fangs parted in a loud yawn as he stretched and scratched one of his eye sockets. And then his fuzzy eyelights fell on you. He smirked. Ah, morning, Robin. Does our second youngest know that you're in his kitchen making us breakfast? It's mid-afternoon. You huffed at him and stirred the browning roux in the pot for your sauce. Must be nice to sleep all day without a care in the world. I haven't seen Pap, so I couldn't exactly ask. I don't know where he is, but I figured he'd forgive me since he doesn't like Axe cooking on his own. He's at Undine's, Axe answered from the table. Who's Undine? You asked. You caught movement out of the corner of your eye and smacked Mutt's hand away from the cheese sauce. Don't stick your hand in the hot pot. You'll burn yourself. But I want some of that. Mutt whined, though his smirk dripped with mischief. You wouldn't let me go hungry, would you? Then I'll make more food. Sit down with Axe. A bright smile lit up Axe's skull. I'll get Butch too. Oh, wait, Axe! You reached out a hand to stop him, but he'd already disappeared into thin air to find his brother. You had only started enough food for one. Adding a bit more for an additional serving wouldn't be that hard, but it was going to take work to catch up and make enough for 4 people. Grumbling, you tried to move more ingredients out while continuously stirring your sauce. Homemade mac and cheese was one of the few meal items you could make, but it was easy to mess up and would burn if you didn't constantly watch it. Need some help? Mutt chuckled as he watched you balance on one foot to try and grab the box of noodles while stirring your sauce. Oh, how you envied Papyrus's long arms. Yes, that would be very helpful. I thought I was initially cooking for just Axe and myself, you barked, feeling stressed as your mind frantically listed all the things you needed to do to catch up. More cheese needed to be shredded, more water needed to go into the pot so there'd be enough for the extra noodles. Did you make enough roux? Thankfully, at that moment, Axe returned with Butch in a puff of iron and sweet rot. Oh, thank God, Butch, you called out to him. He jumped at the urgency of your voice, and his cheekbones flushed with a dull gray glow. Help me! I'll get the others. Axe smiled at the huge amount of ingredients on the counter and disappeared again. You very nearly screamed in panic. Cooking for 4 was hard enough, but was he really going to go bring everyone in the house to the table? How did Papyrus manage it every day? Now it made sense why he stuck to pasta. One sauce to worry about, noodles, and a plate. Hell, you were already struggling with just the sauce. You hadn't even gotten to the salads yet, or the additional sandwiches. Okay, okay, I can do this, you told yourself and grabbed Butch to steer him right in front of the cheese sauce. I need you to stir this constantly and don't let it burn. No, don't put your fingers in there, you barked, your voice shooting up an octave. You grabbed Butch's hand from the pot. What the hell was the deal with these boys and sticking their fingers in hot pots? You fished in a drawer for a spoon and shoved it into Butch's bony palm. Use that if you want to try it, and blow on it first so you don't burn yourself. You looked around and found Mutt at the table, sitting and watching you with a strange expression accentuated by narrow eyelights. Do you want to help? You asked. I could really use another pair of hands. Mutt shrugged and laid his head on his arms. Incredible. He just woke up and he wanted to sleep again. No matter. You had Butch. You wheeled around and started putting plates and bowls together. If no one else had left the house, that meant you needed 8 places. Thank you, Butch. I'm sorry for getting short with you, you said quickly as you darted around him to start a new pot of noodles and to strain the old ones before they became overcooked. Just keep going with what you're doing. Okay. Butch gave a shy, lopsided smile and stared intently at the pot of liquid cheese. He didn't even flinch when you came back with the grater and shredded block cheese like a mad woman over the sauce. As you pulled out a knife and attacked the vegetables for the salad, the scent of iron, frost, and damp wood filled the kitchen. "What did you bribe our second bottomless pit with?" Milord drawled from the table, "to prevent him from consuming everything in sight?" You caught the embarrassed blush on Butch's face and tossed an olive at Milord. It hit him square between the eye sockets. "You leave him alone. He's the only one helping me feed all of you, if you hadn't noticed." A loud, gruff laughter rang from the archway. Red was leaning against it, pointing at the trace of lavender color on Milord's face, with the golden fang flashing in the light. "Cowed by the woman. Some big shot captain your ass is." "Say that again, you inarticulate troglodyte." Milord snarled and stood up so fast his chair toppled backwards. "Hey, both of you," you growled, pausing in your cutting of vegetables, knife in hand, and glared at Milord and Red. "Sit down right now, or neither of you get to eat anything I make for as long as I live." "Cutting words, kid." Sans chuckled as he watched his brothers. Though both grumbled irritably under their breaths, they took their seats with their eyelights watching the glinting motions of your current cooking utensil. "Didn't know you had such a sharp temper." "Knife to know, isn't it?" You smirked, proud of yourself, as Sans filled the kitchen with a short tumble of melodic notes of his laughter. "Oh, no, don't you start that awful habit, too." You turned from the bowls of salad you were making and smiled wide at the sight of Papyrus in the archway. "Pap, you're back. How was—" You searched your head for the name Axe had mentioned. "Undine." "Excellent. She says my specialized attacks is more powerful than it's ever been." Papyrus' chest swelled with pride as his white eyelights spotted your half-finished plates. They moved over to the stove and lingered on Butch, who was smiling shyly and gave his brother a half-hearted wave. Pap's lights widened in shock. "Butch, what are you doing?" "Lily is teaching me how to cook and bake." Butch turned back to the stove and focused again on the pot of sauce while you dumped the massive mound of noodles in for him to stir in and coat with liquid cheese. Mutt's skull turned on his arms, and he examined Butch with very thin eyelights. "Yep, he's been helping me make lunch at the moment." You quickly guided Papyrus to the table and returned to the multitude of plates to assemble sandwiches on them. "So don't you worry about anything, Paps. Oh, and your tiramisu is in the fridge. All of you can try some after lunch if you'd like to. I was sure to make more than enough for everyone." "This is very strange," Papyrus said from his reluctant seat at the table. "I always do the cooking. Edge sometimes will cook for himself, but he refuses to do that for anyone else." "That's not true. I saw him make a grilled cheese for Sans," you said as you portioned the noodles out and tell Butch to go sit down. Your stomach clenched painfully at the smell of food. "Well, that makes sense. Sans is the only one who's ever bested him in combat." "You make it sound like a big deal when you say it like spat." "Sans, stop it." "I can go brawl night, little brother." "Sans!" While you poured out a generous measure of mac and cheese for each plate, you asked, "Where is Edge, anyway? His food's going to get cold." The table collectively looked at Red. He folded his arms over his black hoodie and answered with a rough grumble, "Boss said he ain't eatin' nothing the human makes." Your hand paused halfway from making a ninth plate out of the cupboard for yourself. "Well, I won't force him then," you said in what you hoped was a dignified manner, free of any of the small hurt you were actually feeling. You allowed yourself a small sigh before you brought everyone their meal. "It's not much." You pulled an apple for yourself from your drawer and collapsed, exhausted, into a chair to eat that before digging in with the brothers. You wanted something sweet to balm your hurt, but you couldn't wait for the tiramisu. "But I hope you like it." "I'm impressed with you, human," Pap said as he examined the cheese sauce dripping from his fork. "Cooking for all of my brothers is not easy, and you went through with extra trouble to make so many different things." You chuckled and wiped the apple juice from your lips. "Thanks, Pap. To be honest, I don't know how you do it every day. You really live up to the great in your title, you know." Papyrus' chest swelled with pride. "I really do, don't I?" You took another bite of your apple. "If I may ask, who's this Undine you were visiting? A friend of yours?" Not really." Papyrus shrugged and tipped the entirety of his salad into the void behind his jaws. "It's true that we get along well, but she's a trainer for the guard. My trainer. She has been since I was a cub." Wait, you're in the guard? Your eyebrows shot up as you remembered the conversation, the meeting you overheard before, the one between Sans, Milord, Mutt, and Edge. If Papyrus was in the guard, he might be able to answer all those questions you wanted to ask. Not yet, Papyrus said as he thumbed at the red scarf dangling around his neck. Your hope deflated. But I will be once I finish my training. I'll get a new scarf and it'll be officially official. "What does the royal guard do exactly?" you asked, aware that Milord and Sans had subtly tilted their skulls towards your conversation. It wasn't a crime to ask questions, right? And the things you were asking didn't give your eavesdropping away. "They guard the queens, of course." Pap bit into his sandwich, eating half of it in one bite. "There are other things, but I don't know about them since I have yet to attain a rank. I'm not trying to get so far as the royal guard, though. You have to be especially talented to be selected for that. And I'd rather work more with the citizens." "Queens?" You slowly chew your apple as you considered this pluralization. "I heard about Queen Toriel, but who else?" Across the table Milord cleared his non-existent throat. You barely caught the movement of his skull as he looked at Papyrus. "Never mind that," Pap said with a glance at Milord. "The royal family is extensive and I could talk for hours about each member, and I suppose it can be rather boring and—" "Hey, kid, you mentioned dessert?" Sans held his clean plate out to you. Papyrus's jaw snapped shut and he hung his skull to focus on the remainder of his food. You understood that he must have said something he shouldn't have, and the conversation was over. "Sure, I'll get it." You offered your apple core to Axe, who ate it greedily in a single bite before taking everyone's slicked clean plates to the sink. "Why did Sans and Milord stop Papyrus from telling you about the queens? How many were there?" You knew from one of your monster study classes that the underground ruled by a monarchy. What kind of monarchy had multiple rulers? Unless there was a king that could act as some sort of liaison between multiple queens. But wouldn't Pap have mentioned a king if there was one for the royal guard to protect? You plated tiramisu for everyone. You reminded yourself not to be too nosy. It was natural to be curious, but Sans and Milord probably had a good reason for stopping the conversation. You were a human and from a different country from theirs, and the Underground's royalty was obviously a touchy subject. You just had to trust Sans and Milord's judgment. They both had protected you and helped you in their own ways. It would be a poor repayment to their kindness if you tried to pry over the boundaries they set. A smile crept back to your face as you handed each brother a slice of your dessert. It made you happy that you could do something as small as cooking a meal to repay them, doubly so when you could offer them one of your desserts. Baking for others had always brought you joy. When you set Butch's plate before him, you leaned over and whispered to the side of his skull, "Thanks for helping with everything. Remember, they're just cookies, just butter and sugar and flour." You brushed your fingers over the top of his skull as you straightened up. He gave you an appreciative, lopsided grin as you returned to the counter to plate some sweetness up for yourself. "What do you think, Pap?" you asked as you sat back down and took a bite. The slightly sweet cream intermingled with the bite of rum. The perfect spongy espresso-soaked cookie melted in your mouth, and the bitter cocoa danced on your tongue. "It's good," Pap answered thoughtfully and took another bite. "I thought it would be sweeter, but it's still delicious, and it has a nice texture," he added quickly after seeing the chest-fallen look on your face. "Thank you, I appreciate that. Just so you know, tiramisu isn't supposed to be too sweet. That's just the kind of dessert it is." You smiled at him to show that your feelings weren't hurt by his opinion. Pap's reaction was a bit disappointing, but he did say that he'd never tried it before. "Don't feel bad if you don't like it, Pap. I already have plans for other things to make, and we'll find what you like." As you took another bite, your eyes glanced around the table for the reactions from the others. The plates in front of Axe Butch were already clean. No surprise there. Sans was staring at the bite on his fork with a vacant look on his skull. Was he daydreaming again? Red had scraped all the cocoa off the top to eat and refused to touch any more. Axe and Butch were already splitting Red's rejected leftovers between themselves. Your eyes drifted over to Milord, who had his fork still resting between his pointed teeth. His purple eyelights were aglow as he stared at the tiramisu before him. A little light went off in your head. You smirked at him, joking. "What's the matter, Milord? Got a latte on your plate?" Papyrus groaned at your pun. Axe reached for Milord's practically untouched plate when his creeping hand was immediately smacked away. "Hands off my food!" Milord's frosty tone was sharp, like ice cracking, as he pulled the plate away from his brother and took another bite. A bubble of joy rose in your stomach. It seemed as though you'd finally got something right with him, even if it was on accident. Your eyes drifted to the last brother at the table, Mutt, who was moodily stabbing at his dessert with the tines of his fork. It looked like he hadn't eaten any at all. "What's wrong, Mutt?" you asked, wondering if he hated the taste, too. Or maybe the smell? "Do you want something else?" "It's fine," his raspy voice grumbled. He tipped the plate in front of his sharp teeth, and the entirety of the dessert fell into the void behind his jaw. "I've got work to do." Mutt got up from the table, hands stuffed into his pocket of his sweat pants, and retreated downstairs. You turned and watched him leave over the back of your chair. Was he feeling all right? Did you not cook something properly and it gave him a stomach ache? Yours was a little upset too, from rushing to eat too much too fast. Could skeletons get stomach aches without stomachs? Should you check on him? He had been really sweet to you so far, and you didn't like seeing him upset. You were halfway out of your chair to do just that when a plate shoved itself against your hands. You looked down at the floating plate, which was dripping with lavender plasma, and looked up at Milord curiously. "Don't look at me like that!" He huffed and crossed his arms, turning his gaze to focus on his leather gloves. "Your portion sizes are far too small, human. Fetch me another." Red's rough cackle flew across the table. He banged his fist so hard against the thick wood of his plate rattled in front of him. "No way! The hard ass likes—" "Shut your filthy mouth, you obnoxious cockalorum!" Milord's tone could have frozen the room solid. Red's laughter died instantly. He snarled, "What did you just call me?" "Oh, is an insult lacking in monosyllabic words too strenuous for that lonely singling flicker of thought within your skull?" Milord sneered. His gloved fingers had lavender plasma gathering around them, slowly filling the room with the scent of frost as he matched his brother's glare. Red stood up, his chair squeaking away from the table. "Come on, guys, no need to get mad." You took a step forward, hand outstretched in silent bid for them to lower their hackles. Without looking, Papyrus reached out one of his mitten-covered hands around your waist. He pushed you safely behind him. His white eyelids were fixed unwavering on his brother's. Sans sat up a little straighter in his chair and made a motion that you couldn't quite see towards Axe and Butch. "Big words for a little man." Red growled. Crimson plasma was gathering in his hands as well. Knowing what scent Red's wrath summoned, you dropped the plate in your hands as they flew up to cover your nose. The plate shattered against the tile. The noise drew Red's narrowed crimson eyelids towards you. Then they flickered back towards Milord. Despite the look of loathing he projected towards Milord, the plasma in Red's hands dipped away and began to fade. Pap's grip on you relaxed slightly. "Indeed." Milord smirked in a smug display of perceived victory. His voice dripped with sarcasm as he went on. "I had never thought that your diminutive stature reflected your wit, convict. What a remarkable accomplishment for you, to string more than two words together." Stop antagonizing Red, Milord." Sans' low voice was calm. With that lazy grin he was wearing, he might have been talking about how pleasant the weather was today, even though Red's clenched fist shook with barely contained fury. "In what part am I to blame for this?" Milord scoffed and threw his hands up. Plasma flew from his fingertips. "Those outlandish insinuations that I—" A lavender blush appeared over his nasal ridge. Milord seemed to notice his own color, and his fury doubled as he rounded on Red again. "Just because you're pathetically weak of mind and have all the personality of a psychological tire fire. You're dust, you son of a—" Red leapt across the table and attempted to strangle Milord. The smell of frost and smoke bombed the room. Chairs and plates crashed to the floor. Papyrus caught the dining table that was nearly upended in the scuffle. Butch and Axe leapt out of the way. Nobody calls me fucking weak, you piece of fucking shit." Without Papyrus shielding you, you whimpered and retreated until your back hit the wall bordering the archway. You closed your eyes, squeezed your nose shut with your hands, and wished that you could stop the fear flooding you. You wanted to say something to stop them from fighting, but all that smell of smoke got to you, and you didn't know if you could manage yourself, let alone do anything to stop the fight. You were going to panic and freak out and make everything worse, and hands grabbed your arms and shoulders. A pressing feeling squeezed you tight. Then everything was quiet. Nervously, you cracked an eye open and found yourself standing in the attic loft, your room. Butch and Axe were by your sides. Their bony brows were crinkled in concern. You okay, Lily? Butch asked softly as he ran his fingers through your hair. Axe's red eyelights followed his brother's hand, then he too was petting your hair. I'm okay. You sighed and let your hands fall to stop their touches. Really, I'm fine. I didn't smell anything. I'm okay. Smell? Butch's eyelids fell to your chest, no doubt listening to the fear that still hummed there, and then widened with understanding. You mean our magic? That's what brings back your place? What place? Axe looked between you and Butch, clearly confused. Catching his meaning, you nodded to Butch. Not all of your magic does that. You sat with on your fluffy bed and patted the spaces next to you, offering them to the two brothers. Just reds. The smell of smoke is difficult for me. Smoke? Axe sat next to you, still looking between you and Butch for an explanation. You remember when I would get lost sometimes? Butch took his seat and leaned forward to speak to Axe across from you. Lily gets like that too, she told me. Lost. The light vanished from Axe's socket as his face tilted towards the wooden floorboards. The way he seemed to deflate in that moment, something in your gut told you he was hurt. From sympathy or empathy you didn't know. Or maybe your gut feeling was literally the twist of cramps from your dinner. Either way, you gently put a hand on the back of Axe's blue hoodie. His eyelights flared back into existence at the small touch. He looked at you, at Butch, and then pulled you into a bone-crushing hug. His deep voice trembled slightly as he mumbled, "Thank you." "What for? I should be the one thanking you guys," you said as you ran your fingers over Axe's skull, carefully avoiding the jagged hole lest you hurt him or yourself by accidentally snagging it on your nails. I don't know what came over Red and Milord. Sure, Red needled Milord a bit, but for things to escalate that fast and for them to just start fighting like that. Butch chuckled nervously and fidgeted with the cuff of his red hoodie. They do that a lot. But why? You asked as Axe buried his face in your red sweater dress. Sure, both Red and Milord had pretty abrasive personalities, but they were still family at the end of the day and lived together. I get that sometimes it's healthy to have a sibling spat, but that was a bit much. Red thinks. Butch looked down at Axe and pulled him off you, his jagged teeth frowning. I think that he thinks that Edge will respect him if he defeats Milord. Why wouldn't Edge respect Red? Edge only acknowledges those with might, those that don't need anyone's help. He tests us sometimes. Axe narrowed his eyelight across from you at Butch's shrinking form. You looked between them, wondering what unsaid thing were passing above your head. So far, only Sans has fought him and won. Sans makes the rules for the house. He always has. But Edge still tries to fight him to make his own rules instead of listening to Sans. But he never beats Sans. Nobody can. A loud crash echoed from downstairs. You could barely make out Pap's loud voice yelling about the kitchen window. That sounded strangely familiar. You tore your gaze up from the floor and looked between Butch and Axe. To test your sudden theory, you asked, Is that how Sans got that injury the night I came? I know Edge didn't want me here, but did he seriously challenge Sans to fight just to make sure I was kicked out? Butch looked nervously towards Axe, who shrugged. Sans said if you wanted to stay, that was your choice. Edge wanted to fight you, but Sans refused to let him. He fought Edge in your place for the right to stay. Sans knew that Edge wasn't playing fair, Butch explained, pulling at his red cuffs again. You could see that he already worried multiple holes into the fabric. Edge hates weakness, and he thinks humans are weak, that weakness makes them even more dangerous because monsters would underestimate humans, at least. That's what I think he was yelling at Sans that night. You leaned back on your elbows, your head spinning with this information. So Sans literally fought for you to stay. The fact touched you, but then why would he try and take you home that night? Why did he ignore your emails and put up such a resistance against your living here when you came back to the house to take the job? Well, that's a pretty stupid reason to hate humans, you grumbled and laid back on your bed to stare at the ceiling, wondering why the hell Sans had acted the way he did. Unable to come up with any reasonable explanation, you asked, so then if Red wants Edge to think he's strong, why doesn't he fight Edge himself, or Sans? Why go after Milord at all? Butch visibly winced at the question and looked away. Axe explained. Sans is the strongest out of all of us. Then it's Edge, Red, and Milord are tied. Red hits harder, but Milord is clever. He uses strategy and he's fast. Their wins are even, but Red can never land a solid hit on Milord. He's too slow. Paps, Butch, Mutt, and I aren't on the list. I'm not allowed to fight, and the others don't want to. Wait, why the hell do you guys tear yourselves on how strong you are? You raised a disbelieving eyebrow at Axe, who shrugged. And take no offense, but that's really stupid. Edge doesn't think so. Butch shifted uncomfortably on your sheets. It's how he chooses to treat us based on where we are. He generally avoids Axe, but he won't listen to the rest of us. And you're on the bottom of the list. Axe poked your arm. You winced as your stomach cramped again, but Axe must have thought he poked you too hard because he started gently rubbing that place with his hand. You half wished his hand was rubbing your belly. Those cramps were really something awful. How could Edge even pin you guys against each other for some bullshit rating like that? You wondered aloud. What an awful way to throw your weight around and force a hierarchy on your family by forcing them to fight just to be treated better by one individual who considered himself to be on top. No wonder Red and Milord were so grumpy all the time. It sounded like Edge pushed them around to get them to claim a clearly defined spot, a tiebreaker. Easy. Axe ticked off names on his fingers as he slowly said them. Sans fought Edge, Milord and Red. There was one time Edge provoked me, but Sans... Axe, please, I don't need specifics. You sat up and grabbed Axe's fingers to stop him from ticking off the matchups. You guys shouldn't be ranked at all, least of all like that. You really think so? Butch's highlights flickered as he raised a bony brow at you. Of course. But Edge says strength is everything. You threw your hands up in frustration. There are dozens of definitions of strength. Strength of character, of fortitude, of will. The least of them, in my opinion, is how hard you can hit something. If you have to judge someone, it should be on how much you like them. Even then, strength doesn't matter, because you can care for someone and have them be the first in your mind based on any number of things that are important to you, not because they top the list in any kind of matter. Who is your first, then, of us? Axe tilted his head at you. Butch did the same. That's not a fair question. You folded your arms over your chest and glared at your black stockings. Some things you can't rank, Axe. That's like asking me which of my parents I loved more. I don't have a first, and it's perfectly fine to never have one at all. When you care a lot about someone, you don't assign a number to them. You care that much about us? A gray flush appeared on Butch's nasal ridge, and Axe's skull matched his, but with red. What kind of question is that, Butch? Of course I do. You reached out and pulled the two brothers into you for a group hug. You're my friends. We cook together and go out into the woods to find owls. You guys are patient with my questions and help me with my homework. You show me how to fit in here and are just kind. It already feels like I've known you guys for a long time. How could I not care about you all? Brothers wrapped their arms around you. The three of you fell back onto the bed, each brother claiming one of your sides, and buried their faces into your shoulders. Your hearts swelled with mutual affection as you squeezed them tight. Willow, did you get hurt? Axe lifted his skull from your shoulder and looked at you, his bony brow wrinkled with concern. Huh? You blinked in confusion, barely registering what he said over the surprise of this new nickname. I smell it too. Butch's soft voice radiated concern. He got up onto his elbow and prodded you through your clothes to examine you. Your face grew hot as he and Axe grew bolder and started pushing back your red sleeves, or lifting your legs to look for tears in your black stockings. "Oh my gosh, guys, stop!" You squealed and pushed their searching hands away, your face bright pink. "But you're bleeding." Axe reached out towards you again and you shoved his hand away. "I'm not bleeding. I'm not hurt. Why would you guys think that? I wasn't anywhere near a fight or—" You trailed off as your stomach cramped again and you felt a small wetness between your legs. The pink on your cheeks spread to your whole face and turned crimson. With a quick mumble of bathroom, you leapt from the bed, flew down the narrow staircase, and slammed the door to the privacy of your restroom to check yourself. Sure enough, the first drops of blood had stained the skin inside the peak between your legs. How the actual hell did they smell that? You wondered about this to yourself as you searched the cupboard under the sink for your stash of feminine products. Tampon in hand, you took an inquisitive sniff of yourself and smelled nothing. It might have been more of a problem if you didn't bathe every day, but how the hell? They had known before you did. The cramps. It wasn't just from eating mostly dessert for dinner. You had been about to start your cycle. Usually you had more of a lead up than this, but now that you thought about it, your temper had been closer to the surface of your mind than it usually was, like when you got mad while making dinner, or when you got angry at my lord after you cut your hand. You leaned your head against the cool marble countertop and groaned. If Butch and Axe could tell when you started your period, did that mean the rest of the brothers would notice it too? Did they even understand what a period was? Did monster women get them too? Not every female creature on earth had periods. "Ugh, why me?" you lamented, banging your head against the lip of the sink and wondering if you were going to need to offer a crash course on human sex ed. It was something you had never hoped to discuss with the brothers, least of all Butch and Axe. Butch just seemed too sweet and innocent for such a subject, while Axe, it would just be super awkward. "Okay, I don't have to go as far as details," you whispered to yourself in the mirror, trying to psych yourself up for a conversation you were probably going to have to have. "All I have to do is explain what a period is. They don't know a lot about humans, and it's a natural part of being a human woman. You don't want them to worry about you. Nothing to be embarrassed about." Even with your self-consoling words, the flush returned to your face with a vengeance. Mom had been so calm when she explained all of these things to you back in middle school. How had she done it with such a straight face and without dying of embarrassment? Perhaps it was because you were her daughter, and now you had to explain this too, not only to your friends, but men. Taking a deep breath, you steadied your nerves with the knowledge that they were just worried about you. If you didn't take the time to explain, they wouldn't understand and might think something was seriously wrong with you, especially if they weren't expecting you to bleed for several days straight while menstruating. With the additional thought to help brace you, you opened the bathroom door. Axe and Butch stood at the bottom of the narrow staircase, right on the other side of the door. Axe's hand hung midair as he had been about to grab the brass knob. You pointed up the stairs and said, "All right, let's go. I'll explain what I can, okay?" With nervous glances at each other, the two brothers obeyed. It wasn't until they were both seated once more on the cream-colored sheets of your bed with you standing before them that you spoke. With a slightly strained voice, you said, "First off, I'm not injured. Second, I've never really had to explain this to anyone before, so I'll do my best for you guys, but if you have questions—" "Are you all right?" Butch's quiet voice sounded just as nervous as your own. His white eyelights drifted over your body like he would suddenly spot a stab wound or some other injury. "I'm perfectly fine," you said, your voice a little higher than normal. "It's what you guys smell. I started my cycle, okay?" Your face burned as you admitted this. The two brothers tilted their heads. It would have been comical if not for your embarrassment. "Do monster women not get that?" you asked, your hopes sinking. Your stomach felt like it had vanished from your guts, even as those guts twinged painfully with another cramp. Butch and Axe still looked confused, so you forced out the words, "Periods, the bleeding that comes after ovulation." "Oh." Axe's vacant grin widened, his red eye light glowing with understanding. "You mean heat." "But monster women don't bleed after heat." Butch looked between you and Axe, still confused. "Monsters don't, but the deer in the forest do, sometimes." Axe turned to his brother and scratched his own bony chin while he thought. "It's only if they fail to breed. but they'll come into heat again. They're usually successful, so I don't know how often they cycle, but the males go into rut once every year in the fall, so it makes sense that the females have one heat per year too. To match them, most of their pups that I have seen are always born in late spring or early summer. Every year? Butch's eyelids shrank. He looked disturbed by the thought. How can they do that so often? Food and safe shelter are plentiful here. Axe looked out the circular window out at the forest. Not like the underground. Wait, so monsters? You furrowed your own brow, trying to understand what Axe was explaining to Butch, and thankfully that they didn't ask any more from you. At least they seemed to understand the general concept. Do female monsters really go into heat like deer? Axe nodded. Not as often, though. It's very rare for our females. Usually conditions are not good. They take a long time to be ready. When they are, our females go into heat to let us, the males, know that they are ready to breed. Both you and Butch flushed at this information. You didn't want to ask this question, but your curiosity made you. In a quiet voice, you asked, "And you can smell it? Like with my..." "Yes. How else would we know when our females are most receptive?" Axe smiled at you, clearly not understanding how awkward the air in the room had become. "Our sense of smell is very good. It gives us time to prepare a safe place for our mate." The entirety of your insides vanished. "So, not to be rude, but if you can smell fertility, does that kind of influence you?" Axe tilted his skull at you. "We're not like deer. We aren't driven by lust like other animals in their season. We can control ourselves if we aren't chosen, even though..." A glazed, dreamy look came over Axe's smiling face, and Butch pulled his red hoodie up to cover the gray flush devouring his face. "It's still a very enticing scent." You buried your red face in your hands. What would they say if you told them that humans were so drastically different from monsters? Your cycle happened every month, and you had no control over it. Should you tell them? Yes, this wouldn't be fair to them otherwise. "So humans are a bit different from deer, too." You peeked through your fingers and avoided meeting their inquisitive eyelights. It would be better to say something to prepare them if you didn't want the shifting hormones of your cycle to catch them unaware. "But before I say more, I'm sorry, I gotta ask, is it like a seasonal thing for you too? It's not like you lose your mind once a year, or..." Axe's deep, tumbling laughter echoed off the high, slanted ceiling. "Like I said, we're not animals. We're not going to jump you just because you're in heat. Males in particular only have a strong response to the heat of our chosen mate." You nodded, feeling a bit better. "Right, thank you. Okay, so the thing with humans, with females, we have our cycle, our heat every month." "What?" Butch squeaked and jumped with such force that he actually fell off the bed. Axe just stared at you with blank shock. His single red eyelight widened to the point that it nearly filled a socket. "We can't control it," you added quickly, desperate to explain despite how thoroughly flustered you were from their reactions. "It's only for a few days. I think we ovulate, and then 2 weeks or so after that we bleed for about a week. Then it's another 2 weeks after the bleeding ends before we ovulate again. And that's pretty much the monthly cycle. I don't think I have that timing quite right. Since periods usually last around a week, the whole cycle takes up 28 days. Maybe it's 2 weeks after our period we ovulate, since the uterine lining needs to build up, and then after that peak point we bleed for a week if we're not expecting, and then..." Butch and Axe's alarmed expression cut your messy explanation short. Your shoulders sagged as you sighed. "I guess my point is that every human woman is different. We're not like... Human men can't smell when women are fertile. We just..." Your face burned as you admitted. "Hope that ovulation happens like it's supposed to and keep trying until pregnancy happens." You stared at the floor, not wanting to make eye contact with anyone. Out of the corner of your gaze, you could see Butch's pinprick eyelights peeking out from beyond the bed where he'd laid on the floor. Axe was sitting still. No doubt he was either staring at you or shell shocked. Well, now we all learned something new today, you said, your voice jumping an octave again. You got up and went to your backpack, still avoiding eye contact, and pulled out your notebooks. I've, got to get some of my essays typed up before school. Do you guys have a computer? Mutt and Milord do. Axe was still watching you curiously. You knew this because you caught his gaze when you turned around, notebooks clutched tightly to your chest, but you quickly looked away. Milord's room is next to mine, which is next to Butch. He's at the far end of the hall. With a mumbled thanks, you fled the attic loft to the landing below. It was quiet on the second floor. The fight in the kitchen must be over. You shuffled your feet across the hardwood floor, glad that you had an excuse to leave your room and the awkward conversation behind. But now you had to face another of the brothers and possibly have that same talk all over again. Nope, no way. You weren't going to do that. You find some excuse if they ask you about the scent currently following you. You can send them to Axe for an explanation. Maybe it was cruel of you to shove that off on him, but he seemed to have the best grasp of the subject, and talking about heats and breeding and the like didn't seem to faze him all that much. At least it didn't until you broached the frequency of your own cycle. Looking towards the end of the hall, you counted the doors until your eyes rested on Milord's room. He probably wouldn't ask too many questions, but what if he was still angry from his fight with Red? Milord was touchy at the best of times, even though he seemed to be getting better with you, but it was best if you didn't press your luck with him right now. Everyone had bad days and limits to their patience. You climbed down the wide oak steps and headed for the basement. Someone had already cleaned up the kitchen and taped plastic over the broken window above the sink. Mutt was always understanding, and you wanted to check on him anyways. He seemed upset about something during dinner, and you felt bad that you didn't go to him right away. You knocked on the door to the basement. When you didn't get a reply, you tried again. Thinking that he might not be able to hear you at the top of the stairs, you cracked open the door to call down, Mutt, are you there? What do you want? Mutt's raspy voice called up. He sounded irritated. You opened the door a little wider and stood at the top of the wooden steps. Mostly to check on you. Can I come down? Sure. The steps creaked and groaned the whole way down. A chill leaked through the concrete walls and floor that you could feel even through your red sweater dress and black stockings. The single bulb hanging from the ceiling was off. The only light came from the computers in the corner, which Mutt was seated at. An unlit black cigarette hung limply between his pointed teeth. Hey, Mutt, you said, and approached the back of his chair. His bony fingers danced across his keyboard to minimize whatever he was working on. How are you feeling? You seemed upset at dinner. Did I not cook something right? Oh, fuck, what if he was lactose intolerant? Mutt turned in his chair to face you. His pointed teeth were turned down into a scowl. I'm fine, he grumbled. You don't look fine. He pointed at a scowl, and his red eyelights narrowed at you, at the notebooks in your hands. Their examination drifted downwards to consider your legs. Why do you smell like blood? Your face immediately reddened and your mind raced to come up with an explanation. It's post-heat. Humans bleed after ovulation, so never mind. I'm fine, I promise. I'm more worried about you. Mutt's scowl deepened and his jaw tightened. His fangs almost bit through his cigarette. I said I'm fine. If you won't take that, then what do you really want, human? Human? Your eyebrows jumped up to your hairline, your embarrassment forgotten. Did I do something wrong? I thought you'd like to call me Robin. Apparently you prefer Lily, Mutt grumbled and swiveled around in his chair again so that he was facing the computer, his arms crossed over his chest as he settled to glare at his empty screen. You're upset that Butch gave me a nickname? You shuffled back and forth on your feet to try and keep them off the cold concrete floor. Is that what's bothering you? He refused to answer you, so you tried to walk around the chair to face him. He swiveled away again. He went so far as to turn his skull in the other direction. Come on, Mutt, be reasonable, you pleaded, and set your notebooks on his desk to try and turn one of the arms of the chair. It was immovable with Mutt's resistance. Why does a nickname upset you? Can we please talk about it? Which do you prefer, then? Mutt turned the chair slightly, though his narrow eyelights were resolutely facing away from you. Robin or Lily? Why did that mean so much to him? I like them both. You stood still, knowing that he wouldn't face you no matter how much you danced around the chair. I like the nicknames you guys give me, since all of them mean something to you. What do you mean, all of them? Mutt turned slightly to glare at you out of the corner of his socket. His cigarette was gone. He must have either bitten clean through it or eaten it. Well, I guess Axe likes to call me Willow now. Mutt growled angrily and stood up from his chair to stomp over to his bed. He fell into it face first, pulled his black hood over his skull, and buried his face in his arms. You followed him and gingerly sat upon the edge of the bare pillow-top mattress. When you reached out to touch his sleeve, he jerked it out of your grasp. Go away. Do you really want me to? You asked, saddened by the rejection. You could recognize that he was jealous, but you didn't know how to comfort him. You weren't going to ask Butch and Axe to stop calling you by their chosen nicknames. That would hurt them, too. As moments passed and he didn't reply, you scooted a bit closer to him on the bed. Why don't you find one of my brothers, since you like being with them so much? He snapped as you sat near him, but without touching him. Because I want to be here, with you. Mutt snorted his disbelief into the sheets. Yeah, sure, you want to be around the one that sleeps half the day away and spends the other half in a basement working or doing fuck all, he added bitterly, his voice muffled by the sheets. My brothers are way more interesting than me. That's not true. You shook your head and laid down on your belly so that your face was close to his. All of you are interesting in your own ways, and I like you all for those unique reasons. I want to be around you right now because you're the one that makes me the most comfortable, even when you are teasing me. As an afterthought, and with a small hope that might make Mutt feel better, you added, and I kind of like it when you do. It's fun. You really know how to cheer me up. Mutt lifted his head just enough to stare at you with a single flickering red eyelight. This is kind of embarrassing to admit, you said with a pink on your cheeks, but I already kind of look forward to your teasing. It makes me smile after, even if I'm shaking my head too. And I hope you don't mind, but I already kind of think of you as the one I want to go to when I feel like I need help. Not just for questions of monster kind, but when when I have my own issues. You're a really good listener. When he didn't say anything, you took that as a sign to continue. You know the most about me, Mutt, and I mean that overall, not just in this house. No one else has glimpsed my scars. The big thing about that is that you never asked me more about them. Do you know how much that means to me? Do you know how many people know about my fear of fire? No. Just two, my therapist and you. Want to know why? Mutt lifted his head and nodded. I told my therapist because I needed help to save me from myself when I was in a really dark place and everything had to be dragged out of me before I drowned under it. I told you because I trust you. You're the first person I wanted to understand me, crazy as it might sound. I already knew that I could trust you almost the moment I met you. Call it a gut feeling. Do you think I would tell you any of this if I didn't want to be around you? I suppose not. Listen, Mutt. You gently took his bony fingers in yours and gave them a squeeze. I would like to stay in this house for a long time. You softly ran your thumb over the bumpy joints separating his finger bones. And that means that eventually someone else might make me feel like I can open up to them. But you and I both know and will remember who the first one was. So please don't be jealous. You mean a lot to me. Who says I'm jealous? Mutt scoffed, but you could hear a lightness return to his raspy tone. He turned his skull towards you, eyeing you with an expression you couldn't read. Suddenly he flipped you around and pulled you backwards so that he could curl around your body. Your face burned as you felt the steady rise and fall of breath from his rib cage pressed against your back. Warm breath filled your ear as he whispered, What do I get? I want something that's just mine. Well, you're the only one that calls me Robin. Nope, not enough. Mutt shook his skull and started to comb his fingers through your hair. What else you got? You tried to ignore the way his other hand pulled your waist to draw you closer. His ribs were hard against your back, but not uncomfortable. Why was he so hands-on? Why did this simple act of laying together make your palms clammy and had your stomach do somersaults? How about this? When I make those truffles for you, I'll make a flavor just for you. No one else will get to try them. How's that? Better, I guess. Mutt sighed and rested his jaw on the top of your head. Well, what do you want then? Can I see them? Your scars? You stiffened, ice filled your body. You pushed yourself away from Mutt and sat up. No. Robin? Mutt propped himself up on an elbow, staring at the spot of your chest where you knew your soul would be, his voice filled with concern. I didn't mean anything by it. No! You turned away and pulled your legs to your chest. Your limbs started to shake and your fingers pulled at your hair as you squeezed your eyes shut, pushing the memories away. No one ever, ever gets to see those. Never! Mutt sat up and touched your shoulder. You flinched but didn't pull away. Robin, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have asked. I know that it's a bad subject for you. After a long while, you said quietly, It's okay. I'm not mad. It hurts to remember. Please don't ask me to do that. When your body stopped shaking, you looked over your shoulder at Mutt. He seemed afraid to move any closer. You scooted back across the mattress, your arms wrapped around his shoulders in a loose hug. One day, when I'm ready, I'll tell you why I can't show you. Maybe even why they're there, but not today. Mutt gently nuzzled the top of your head. I won't ask again. You squeezed him tighter. Thank you. End of chapter. Fanfic reading by Lacewing. Original story by Oolongteacup. Please read the original work on Archive of Our Own, links found in the description. If you'd like to see me do more works like this, please like and subscribe as well as you can donate directly to my Ko-fi.